Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into the shadows of medieval Europe. You're not a knight in shining armor or a mysterious monk cloaked in wisdom. Nope, you've just been handed the worst job in the village, as you stand ankle-deep in mud, breathing the sour blend of sweat, sewage, and roasting meat from the market stalls. Someone casually informs you that your new title is executioner, and that you probably won't survive this job with your soul or your sanity intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'm serious. Life's short. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is over there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The year is somewhere around 1347, though honestly, no one's quite sure. Calendars are more of a suggestion than a tool. You're standing outside a town that smells of wet wool and livestock, and you're about to start a job you didn't apply for. The last guy vanished, and here you are, handed a hood, a grimy axe, and a reputation that'll cling to you like wet linen in winter. You're not part of the town. You're necessary, but unwanted. People give you wide berths, muttering under their breath as you pass. Kids don't throw stones at you, but they whisper stories about you being part demon. You don't get to sit at taverns unless it's in the corner, alone, with a mug that smells suspiciously like it's been rinsed with tears and fear. The truth is, executions are public events. It's considered entertainment, especially on slow market days. But no one thinks about the person who actually has to swing the blade, tie the knot, or light the fire. That's you now. Congratulations, you're not trained. There's no orientation. You might get a brief, awkward chat with the town bailiff who grimaces the entire time, like explaining how to kill someone is a bit beneath his station. Historians still argue whether executioners received formal training in some regions. Some evidence suggests they did, while other towns just winged it. It starts with your name. You may as well forget it. People now refer to you as the headsman, or worse, that man. A fringe theory even suggests executioners used symbolic names to avoid retaliation. Names like Master John or Black Peter. One poor soul was nicknamed Hans of the Red Beard, and you'd better believe no one invited Hans to dinner. You live in a house near the edge of town. Not quite in, not quite out. It's structurally sound, but with an atmosphere that makes flowers wilt faster than usual. Locals say the soil's cursed. You plant herbs to mask the smell of death that clings to you, but even the rosemary seems nervous. Despite all this, you have a job. That's not nothing in this century. Most people are peasants who own 2 shirts, 0 teeth, and a strong opinion on turnips. Your work is visible. And while no one wants to be your friend, no one wants to be on your bad side either. The tools of your trade are simple but terrifying. You've got a rusty axe that's seen better centuries, a rope that frays in all the wrong places, and, if you're unlucky, a wheel. We'll talk more about that horror later. For now, it's hanging or beheading. And guess what? You're expected to know when and how to do each. The laws are complicated, written in Latin, and you can't read. You might think you'd be assigned only the bad guys. But here's the kicker. Some folks get sentenced to death for stealing bread, talking back to a noble, or looking vaguely like a heretic. Executioners didn't get to ask questions. You follow orders, that's the deal. If you don't, you might be next. So there you are, standing on a wooden scaffold hastily built over a pile of hay to absorb the mess, as one helpful townsman puts it. The crowd gathers, men, women, and children, like it's a festival. People even bring snacks. One lady's munching on something suspiciously crunchy as she eyes your axe. Your hands shake. The condemned man is terrified. You lock eyes, he pleads. You look away. You know this won't go well. They rarely do. A man in robes shouts something holy. The crowd murmurs in anticipation, and you raise the axe. Your muscles scream from the weight. This thing isn't sharp. It's more of a glorified cleaver. You swing, and instantly regret it. The first execution is always the worst. Not because of the gore, though yes, it's bad, but because you realize what this job is. It's not about justice. It's about spectacle. It's not about right or wrong. It's about maintaining fear. And as you stand there, trembling, the wind cuts through your robes, and you think, this is your life now. This role, this weight. And deep down, you start to wonder, was I chosen for this because no one else would do it, or because I'm somehow suited to it? That thought will haunt you long after the crowd leaves and the blood dries. You don't choose to become an executioner. Not really. It's not like you're sitting around the medieval job board with listings like pig herder, thatched roof repairman, and professional killer. More often than not, the position chooses you. Sometimes it's passed down, like a cursed family heirloom. Sometimes you commit a crime yourself, and the judge gives you a choice. Swing the axe or face it. That's your story, actually. You'd stolen a loaf of bread, or maybe insulted a minor noble. The records are unclear. Most were written with ink made from oak galls and regret. But the punishment was clear. You were given a grim offer, and in a moment of sweaty panic, you accepted. Now, you're branded in more ways than one. Not physically, not yet, but socially, spiritually. It's as if you've been dipped in garlic and failure. Even the dogs avoid you. And that's saying something in an era where dogs eat almost anything. The townspeople don't hate you exactly. They need you. But they look at you like you're contagious. Like one handshake will get them infected with bad luck or moral ambiguity. When you walk through the market, conversation dips like a church candle in the wind. You become a black hole in the middle of their daily routine. And then there's the clothing. You'd think being forced to kill people would be bad enough, but no. You also have to wear an outfit that screams, "Do not engage." Black leather, usually, a hood, sometimes just a sack with holes for eyes. One executioner wore a bear's head and cloak, terrifying everyone, including himself. Historians still argue whether that was tradition or just one very committed fashion choice. Your housing situation isn't ideal. You're often stuck living just outside the city walls, close enough to hear the church bells, far enough that no one brings you leftovers. The walls protect them from bandits. You're fair game. Even the baker, who used to smile at you when you were just another nameless peasant, now stiffens when you approach. "No samples today," he mutters, not meeting your eye. Not that you want the bread. Not after seeing where his hands have been. When you do get paid, it's in copper coins that smell of sweat and sin. Some say executioners were actually paid quite well for the time. Others argue they were compensated mostly in free lodging and the right to confiscate the belongings of the executed, which, frankly, sounds like the world's worst shopping spree. And if you think your social life is salvageable, think again. Marrying as an executioner. Let's just say the dating pool becomes a shallow, muddy puddle. Your neighbors whisper warnings to their daughters. You don't want to end up like Marta, do you? Living next to the Axeman. Marta didn't marry you, by the way. She moved to a different village. Even the church keeps you at arm's length. Technically, you're helping uphold divine justice. But spiritually, you're a walking contradiction. You kill in God's name, but you're not allowed on consecrated ground. Priests offer blessings with one hand and wipe their hands on their robes afterward. It doesn't help that people believe in omens. Strange dreams, birds flying the wrong way, goats that stare too long. And you standing there with your collection of ropes and blades. You're basically a one-man apocalypse. But there's a small irony in all this. Despite the fear, the revulsion, the awkward silences at communal gatherings, you have power. Real, squishy, uncomfortable power. People avoid you, yes, but they also obey. No one wants to be on your bad side. A few whispers here and there, and suddenly someone's questioning if that neighbor of theirs might be a heretic after all. It's a lonely kind of influence. The kind that makes you wonder if you're still a person or just a function. You start noticing your reflection less. Your hands feel heavier. You stop dreaming. There's a story passed among executioners, one that might be apocryphal or maybe just too real to be recorded. A man in Austria, tasked with executing a known criminal, hesitated at the last moment. The crowd jeered, the magistrate barked orders, and the condemned man offered a knowing smile. The executioner dropped the axe and walked away. By nightfall, he'd vanished. His house was burned. No one ever spoke his name again. Historians debate whether he actually existed. But you think about him often, about walking away, disappearing into the woods, changing your name, growing turnips. But every time that thought rises, you remember, where would you go? Who would accept you? And so, you stay. You perform your duties. You wake up every day with a little less hope, a little more skill. Your swings get cleaner. Your rope knots tighter. You stop flinching at Scream's dot. You start to blend into your own legend. One morning, a child dares to speak to you, asks if you're a monster. You kneel down and say, no. But your voice cracks, in a way that suggests you're not entirely sure. Later that night, you stare at the moon from your crooked window, wondering if it shines differently on executioners. Probably not, but it feels like it does. The tools you're handed define your days and nights. The axe is the centerpiece of your grim toolkit, but it's far from the shiny, heroic weapon you'd imagine from stories. It's heavy, blunt from years of chopping, and the handle often splinters in your calloused hands. You never quite trust it. One slip means you have to go back and try again, and the crowd isn't patient. Besides the axe, there's the rope. A simple thing, but critical. You learn the hangman's knot early because hanging is your other main method of execution. Yet it's far from straightforward. The knot has to be tied perfectly. Too loose, and the victim slowly chokes. Too tight, and the neck snaps instantly, but sometimes the drop isn't long enough and it just feels like slow strangulation. Getting it right is a brutal mix of physics and guesswork. Then there are the lesser-known devices. fancy torture machines disguised as execution tools. The wheel, for instance, is a medieval version of the worst torture device you never wanted to see. Victims are tied to a giant wheel, limbs shattered and woven through the spokes, slowly dying over hours or days. You're expected to be the one operating these instruments, but honestly, many executioners wish they could forget this part entirely. One bizarre, fringe tool you might come across is the breaking wheel, sometimes called the Catherine wheel. It's so named because of Saint Catherine, who, legend says, survived being broken on the wheel thanks to divine intervention, then promptly got beheaded. Historians still argue whether this saint's story was meant to inspire or terrify people into submission. But either way, it's not a tool you want to wield. Your maintenance duties extend beyond just sharpening the axe or checking the rope. You are also the town's grim mechanic, repairing chains, oiling gears, and occasionally cleaning the blood-soaked wooden platform. The smell lingers, stubborn and pungent, like a bad memory you can't scrub away. Despite all the seriousness, there's an odd, almost dark humor in your work. You once found a squirrel had chewed through your rope the night before a scheduled hanging. Imagine that. A tiny rodent almost ruining your one shot at professional pride. You cursed softly, tied a new knot, and hoped the crowd wouldn't notice the delay. Your tools aren't just functional. They're symbolic. They embody fear and authority. You sometimes wonder if the axe carries its own personality, a slow, grim companion that whispers, "Another one today." The weight of it reminds you every time you lift it that it's not just wood and metal. It's a vessel of finality, one curious, slightly comical tidbit. Executioners occasionally carried small bells attached to their belts, not to announce their arrival like a festive parade, but as a warning to bystanders to keep their distance. You'd jingle along the street, and people would part like you were a ghost, or worse, a walking disaster. The bells became a symbol of your curse, announcing that doom was nearby. Yet, in some towns, executioners were required to carry other unusual items. A padlock key, supposedly to lock away souls or sins, or even a small purse of salt to ward off evil spirits. It's unclear how seriously these were taken, but you found the salt handy to sprinkle on the platform now and then, because, well, hygiene wasn't exactly medieval executioners' strong suit. Sharpening your axe became an oddly meditative routine. The scrape of stone against blade, the flick of sparks in the dim light. It's a rare moment of calm in your chaotic existence. You focus on the blade's edge, imagining it slicing through more than just flesh. Maybe your own isolation, your fading identity. Your toolbox, worn and stained, carries more than weapons. It holds your fears, your regrets, and the ghostly echoes of those you've sent to the afterlife. You keep it locked, but sometimes, late at night, you imagine the tools whispering back. Your daily life as an executioner is a strange blend of routine and ritual, chaos and isolation. You wake up before dawn in your lonely house just beyond the town's edge. The cold stone floor chills your feet, a reminder that comfort isn't part of your job description. You move through the morning fog to prepare for the day's grim duties. Breakfast is a sparse affair, often just stale bread and weak ale. You don't eat much, nervous stomach maybe. The smells from the nearby marketplace drift through your window, a teasing reminder of normal life going on without you. You envy the butcher who swings his cleaver with purpose that doesn't end in death sentences. your first task is inspecting your equipment. That rusty axe demands a fresh sharpening. The rope gets a careful knot check, and the wooden scaffold needs reinforcement after last week's execution when the condemned almost slipped through a loose plank. You patch the cracks, thinking that one day the platform might collapse under the weight of all your sins. Sometimes the town's bailiff or magistrate will drop by with grim instructions. They're always in a rush, like death itself is an inconvenient chore. Today's sentence: a thief caught stealing chickens for the third time. You suppress a sigh. The cycle of crime and punishment is endless, and you're the grim punctuation mark. The condemned arrives, escorted by guards. Their eyes meet yours, searching for mercy. You can't give it. The ritual demands detachment. Pity is a dangerous distraction. You remember the story of a French executioner who reportedly wept during an execution. Historians still debate if that was a sign of humanity or weakness. Crowds gather in the town square, filling every available space. The murmur of voices, the rustle of rough woolen clothes, and the occasional clatter of horseshoes set a peculiar backdrop for death. Children sneak close, fascinated and terrified, while elders murmur prayers. You learn quickly that the execution is as much for the living as for the dead. As you ascend the scaffold, the weight of all eyes feels like a physical burden. The air tastes metallic, thick with anticipation. You position your tools, exchange a glance with the condemned. Sometimes a wordless understanding passes between you. Then the priest steps forward, reciting prayers in Latin, a sound both comforting and haunting. Your hands steady as you raise the axe. It's not just a weapon, it's an instrument of justice, fear, and survival. You swing. The crowd gasps, some cheer, others avert their eyes. The condemned's body drops. The silence that follows is heavy, almost reverent. Afterward, you clean your tools, mindful to remove every trace. Blood can't be left to fester. It attracts flies and rumors alike. You take the condemned's belongings, a grim tradition that adds a small financial cushion to your otherwise meager earnings. Evenings are lonelier. The townsfolk avoid you, their glances sharp but distant. You walk the streets in silence, shadows your only companions. Sometimes you catch a reflection in a puddle and barely recognize the hollow-eyed figure staring back. You recall reading about executioners in other lands, some revered, others reviled. In Japan, the koka carried out similar roles but were often respected for their discipline and ritual purity. Historians still argue whether these differing cultural attitudes affected executioners' mental health. But you can't help but wonder how much easier life might be with respect instead of fear. Some nights, when the moon is low and the village sleeps, you write letters you never send. You write to a life you once dreamed of, to people you lost, to yourself before the axe. But dawn always comes, and with it, the sound of the town bell signaling your next grim appointment. You find small moments of solace where you can. A song hummed by a market woman, the smell of fresh bread wafting through a crack in a door, the softness of moss near a forgotten stream. They remind you that despite your curse, life persists around you. Still, comma. The question lingers. Who saves the executioner from himself? Your mind drifts sometimes, wandering through the myths and stories wrapped around executioners like a thick, suffocating cloak. People think of you as a grim figure, but in reality, you are as human as anyone else, just trapped in a role that makes normality impossible. There's a legend in England about a hangman named Jack Ketch, who became the archetype of the cruel, incompetent executioner. The story goes that he was so clumsy he botched several executions, sparking riots. Some say the name Jack Ketch became synonymous with death itself. Historians still argue whether Jack Ketch was a real person or a nickname given to several bungling hangmen. But regardless, his infamy paints the executioner as a villain in the popular imagination. You, however, strive for precision. Every stroke of your axe, every knot tied on the rope, every word spoken is calculated. It's a strange kind of pride. The better you are, the less suffering the condemned endure. It's a grim mercy. The town's tales often depict executioners as almost supernatural, immune to pain, emotionless, perhaps even cursed to carry evil. This folklore grows with every whispered story, every frightened child's tale. You start to wonder if these myths grow from fear of death itself, funneled through your awkward role. Your family history is as tangled as the executioner's noose. Some of your ancestors were indeed executioners, while others fled to avoid the stigma. You've inherited a patchwork of legends, superstitions, and sometimes strange privileges. For example, in some places, executioners were allowed to marry outside their social class, a tiny island of freedom in an otherwise locked-down existence. A fringe but fascinating bit of history involves executioners sometimes doubling as healers. It sounds contradictory. How could someone who ends lives also save them? But it's true. You learn the basics of anatomy because, well, you need to know where to strike and how the body works. Some executioners applied this knowledge to treat wounds or assist in childbirth. Historians debate whether this was a pragmatic dual role or an attempt at atonement. Speaking of dual roles, you once read about an executioner who ran a tavern. The irony of serving ale by night and swinging the axe by day isn't lost on you. Patrons probably whispered, "There's the man who ends lives and starts hangovers." It's a strange juxtaposition, but maybe it's how they coped. Your own relationship with death is complex. You don't fear it. You've stared it in the face too often, but you respect it. You understand that death is part of the cycle of life, as much as spring follows winter. Yet you long for something more, something beyond this endless cycle of endings. You've overheard scholars debating whether executioners were victims of their time or willing participants in cruelty. You don't have the luxury of debate. You act because you must. The sword of justice swings whether you like it or not. Sometimes you wonder what it would be like to live without the heavy cloak of your profession, to walk through a market and be greeted with smiles, to sleep without nightmares, to love without whispers and glances. But that's a dream for another life, another time. Until then, you continue your work, balancing the weight of the axe with the weight of your soul. Your place in the medieval town's social order is as paradoxical as it is precarious. You're essential, yet shunned. Powerful, yet powerless. The executioner's social standing is a strange cocktail of necessity and stigma. You inhabit the margins, neither fully embraced by the common folk nor entirely aligned with the ruling elite. In many towns, you live on the outskirts, sometimes literally outside the city walls, isolated from neighbors who fear the contagion of your profession. Your home might be near the gallows, a constant reminder of your role, and the cries of the condemned seep into your walls at night like unwelcome ghosts. The medieval executioner's life is a lesson in contradictions. You're simultaneously feared and pitied. People avoid your gaze in the marketplace, yet you are one of the few people who can enter the prisons freely, a gatekeeper of death. You hear whispers that some executioners had a secret camaraderie, a brotherhood bound by shared isolation and sorrow. They exchange tips on the best axe angles, or how to keep the crowd calm, or how to live with the ghosts that follow you home. Historians still debate how organized these bonds were, but you find the idea comforting. Marriage prospects for an executioner were famously bleak. Few wanted to marry into such a profession, yet in some places, executioners' families carved out unique niches. Your spouse might run a tavern, a tailor shop, or a herb garden, businesses that benefited quietly from your grim but steady income. You remember reading that in some German towns, executioners could pass their job down to sons, creating dynasties of death dealers. This was both a blessing and a curse. Family legacy weighed heavy when it meant inheriting such a dark role. Historians still argue whether this hereditary system was a practical solution to keep the role filled, or a cruel perpetuation of stigma. The townspeople often attributed strange powers to executioners. Some believed you could curse with a glance or bring bad luck just by passing. Others thought you had secret knowledge of the supernatural. You know better. The only magic here is human fear. Yet there were odd privileges. Executioners sometimes received payment in land or goods, exemptions from certain taxes, or the right to attend noble events, though from a distance. In some regions, you could even run a small business with little interference because your work was too important to question. The contradictions continue in how you're treated after death. While most executioners are buried in unconsecrated ground, outside holy cemeteries, some rare exceptions were made, especially if they had been dutiful or pious. Historians still debate how much of this was based on genuine respect or pragmatic convenience. The town's children tell stories about you that range from terrifying to ridiculous. You're the boogeyman who will snatch naughty kids, but also a tragic figure, doomed to eternal loneliness. Sometimes you catch a child's wide-eyed stare and wonder what they imagine when they think of you. On rare occasions, a townsman will quietly approach and offer thanks, maybe for mercy shown in execution, or for keeping the town safe from criminals. These small moments flicker like fragile candles in your dark world. In all this, you live knowing that your profession is both your identity and your cage. You walk a line between life and death, belonging and exile. The weight of your job isn't just physical. It's the psychological burden that settles into your bones. You live surrounded by death, but it's not the dead that haunt you. It's the living. The faces you see in the crowd, the eyes of the condemned moments before their last breath. These stick with you in ways no axe can sever. Sleep is a rare commodity. Your dreams are restless tapestries of voices, screams, and shadows. You wake up drenched in sweat, heart pounding as if you've just dodged an invisible blow. Sometimes you swear you can still hear the whispered pleas of mercy, long after the scaffold has emptied. You seek solace in small rituals, lighting candles at dusk, muttering prayers you barely believe in, or staring at the stars to remind yourself of something bigger than your grim world. Historians still debate whether executioners developed unique coping mechanisms or simply descended into despair. You hope for the former. A particularly quirky story you once heard comes from a French executioner who reportedly kept a pet dog named Justice. The dog supposedly sensed when a condemned man was particularly innocent or guilty, and would howl mournfully before executions. Skeptics say it was just a well-trained hound, but you like to imagine there's some truth to it. You also notice that many executioners developed a peculiar gallows humor. Dark jokes that only those who face death daily can truly understand. It's a way to deflect the horror, a mental shield. For instance, some executioners joked that their favorite song was Another One Bites the Dust, long before Queen made it a hit. It's this kind of irony that keeps you sane. Your isolation cuts deep. Townsfolk avoid you like a plague. Children mock you from afar, and even your closest friends keep a cautious distance. You become a stranger even to yourself. A shadow wandering through the streets, disconnected from normal life. Some executioners found ways to channel their anguish creatively, writing poetry, carving wooden figures, or even composing simple tunes on a lute. You toy with the idea of learning an instrument, imagining how soft music might drown out the harsh clang of chains and the screams. Yet you remain haunted by the paradox of your role, being a servant of the law, but also its most feared enforcer. This duality blurs your sense of justice and mercy. You wonder if the real punishment lies not in death, but in the years of carrying out death for others. The moral ambiguity seeps into every action. You ask yourself, over and over, are you the instrument of justice or its victim? Historians still argue whether executioners were ever fully accepted by society, or always condemned as necessary evils. Your reflections sometimes drift to the condemned themselves. Were they truly guilty, or victims of harsh laws and cruel rulers? The line between justice and cruelty feels as thin as the rope around a neck. In your rare moments of quiet, you find yourself whispering apologies to the souls you've sent on their final journey. Maybe it's a superstition, or maybe it's your way of holding on to what little humanity you have left. And in those whispers, you find a fragile hope that someday your story will be understood, not as the story of a monster, but of a man caught in history's unforgiving grip. The tools of your trade are as familiar as your own hands, yet every scratch, every notch on the axe or the rope's frayed fibers carries a story. You maintain them meticulously, knowing that a dull blade or a poorly tied knot could turn a quick death into a prolonged nightmare. And that's a failure you refuse. Your axe is your constant companion, heavier than it looks, its wooden handle worn smooth from years of use. You have learned to balance its weight perfectly, swinging with a practiced grace that belies the grimness of your task. Some executioners had custom-made weapons, ornate and fearsome, while others had to make do with whatever the town provided. Historians still debate how much the quality of an executioner's tools affected the execution's outcome and public perception. There's a curious tradition in parts of medieval Europe where executioners would keep their axe blades as family heirlooms, sometimes inscribing them with the protective runes or prayers. This might seem like a superstitious holdover, but in your line of work, a little superstition feels like a good ally. The rope is another vital instrument, a simple hemp cord with a deceptively complex purpose. You learned how to tie the hangman's knot to ensure the right drop and quick end. a skill requiring both strength and precision. Too long, a drop, and the condemned might be decapitated. Too short, and they suffer a slow strangulation. This balance is a grim science, one taught through trial, error, and whispered advice from predecessors. In some towns, use all was so maintained to be entertained, but the stocks and repel or no tools of public humiliation before death, or as a punishment in their own right. Watching a crowd jeer at a shamed offender is a different kind of power, less final than the axe, but no less charged with fear and control. Your toolkit also includes smaller items. A bucket for the condemned's last drink, a black hood for covering faces, and sometimes a ceremonial robe worn during official duties. These items create an eerie pageantry around your work, blurring the line between grim business and dark theater. Some executioners carried knives for cutting hair or nails before the final act, practical tools to prepare the condemned. You recall reading about an executioner in Italy who also kept a set of surgical tools, blurring the line between executioner and healer. A bizarre duality that fascinates historians and raises questions about medieval attitudes toward life and death. On execution day, you carry your tools with a mix of reverence and dread. They are extensions of yourself, symbols of your burden. You handle them carefully, knowing that any mistake could ignite unrest or turn your life into a nightmare. Crowds often fixate on your tools as much as on you. The gleaming axe head draws gasps. The coiled rope triggers whispers. You sense their mixed emotions: fear, fascination, sometimes a grudging respect. You also carry invisible tools: mental preparation, calm breathing, and a steady gaze. These are as vital as any physical instrument, helping you perform your duty without succumbing to panic or regret. Sometimes you wonder if your tools hold the true power, or if it's the fear you wield that matters most. Maybe it's both, entwined like the fibers of your rope, pulling tight around the threads of life and death. You clean your tools after each use, scrubbing away blood and sweat, but never the memories. They linger, etched into the steel and wood, a testament to your place in this harsh world. The day of an execution dawns like no other. You wake early, the sky still a pale gray, the town quiet but tense. Your heart beats a steady drum in your chest as you prepare, not just your tools, but your mind for what's to come. You dress in your dark robe, the fabric heavy on your skin, a tactile reminder of the weight you bear. You walk through streets slowly stirring to life, the scent of fresh bread mingling with the less savory smells of the city's refuse. The hum of merchants setting up stalls contrasts sharply with the chill in your veins, a stark reminder that while others chase routine, you chase finality. You arrive at the prison, where the condemned waits. You notice how human they look: flesh, bone, and the flicker of fear in their eyes. You say little, offering a brief nod or a few measured words. Your presence is both comfort and doom. The crowd gathers outside the gallows, a restless sea of faces. Some are curious, others morbidly eager, and a few genuinely sorrowful. Children cling to their parents, wide-eyed and whispering. You've heard rumors that some townsfolk bring baked goods or alcohol to steady their nerves. You suspect that's better than what you'll find in your own stomach. As the condemned is brought forward, you perform your ritual, tying the rope, adjusting the hood, steadying your own shaking hands. The crowd hushes, a breath held in collective suspense. The drop comes swiftly. You hear the snap, the sickening jolt. The crowd reacts with gasps, some with cheers. Your job is done, but your work continues, lowering the body, checking the result, preparing for the next. You notice how quickly the crowd disperses, as if death makes the air too thick to breathe. Some linger, eyes fixed on the lifeless form, trying to make sense of the brutal finality. Back at your quarters, you clean your tools, your hands steady despite the adrenaline ebbing away. You try to separate yourself from the faces and voices, but they cling like shadows. There's a fringe debate among scholars about how executions affected public health. Some argue that the gallows were breeding grounds for disease due to the exposure of bodies and crowds, while others believe the rituals were surprisingly hygienic for their time. You lean toward the latter. You've seen the care taken to dispose of remains quickly, but you've also smelled the decay. You often reflect on how execution days blend into one another, a never-ending loop. Yet each is unique, marked by subtle differences, a new face, an unexpected crowd, a whispered prayer. You wonder if the condemned ever understand the strange mercy in your precision, the effort to end suffering swiftly, or if they see only the finality, the moment they lose everything. Your thoughts drift to the executioner before you, the one who held this grim office centuries ago. Did they feel as you do? Did they find solace in their tools, in their rituals, or in the silence that follows the crowd's departure? The gallows stand empty now, a silent witness to countless endings and beginnings. You touch the rough wood, the familiar grain grounding you. And as night falls, the town forgets the executioner's role until the next dawn, when the cycle will begin anew. Your world is filled with rituals, some practical, others oddly theatrical, that mark the executioner's role beyond the act itself. One of the strangest is the tradition of purification after executions. You might be expected to wash your hands in vinegar or don fresh clothes, as if scrubbing away the moral contamination. It's a reminder that your profession is not just physical labor, but also a spiritual burden. In some regions, you had to perform rituals that seemed almost ceremonial. Lighting candles, saying prayers aloud, or even carrying charms to ward off evil spirits. Historians still argue whether these acts were genuine religious practices or psychological crutches to help you face the horrors daily. You might have attended funerals for the executed, standing apart from the mourners. Some executioners kept small keepsakes, pieces of rope, a blood-stained cloth, as grim souvenirs. A French executioner was rumored to keep a bone from each condemned as a macabre ledger, a story that likely blends fact and folklore. Crowds gathered not only for the spectacle, but also to witness what justice looked like, tangible and terrifying. The executioner's role was deeply public, making you a figure of authority, but also a target of superstition and fear. Speaking of superstition, you might have worn a protective amulet or carried a rabbit's foot, odd relics believed to shield you from the curses of the condemned or from supernatural retaliation. Some townspeople insisted you avoid certain days or times, believing the stars or phases of the moon influenced your effectiveness. You can almost hear the whispered warnings. Don't go out on a Friday the 13th, lest you join the ranks yourself. Your profession also intersected with politics and power plays. At times, you were called upon to execute nobles, odus, or high-profile criminals, a task fraught with risk and delicate diplomacy. Your actions could sway public opinion or send a message from the ruler. Sometimes, you had to handle executions that were less about justice and more about spectacle. Public displays meant to instill fear or demonstrate control. You might have found yourself acting in a grim theater, your every move scrutinized and choreographed. You recall a curious anecdote of an executioner who supposedly refused to execute a child or a pregnant woman, risking his position. Historians debate if such refusals were common or just romanticized tales of compassion. Despite the spectacle, you also experienced moments of quiet, when the crowd was thin, when the condemned faced death with dignity or resignation. These moments humanized your work, reminding you that behind every sentence was a person with a story dot, and through it all, the line between justice and cruelty blurred, leaving you to navigate a role no one else wanted, but everyone needed. The social stigma surrounding your job is a constant shadow, one that no amount of bravery or dark humor can fully dispel. You are simultaneously essential and despised, needed by society but pushed to its edges. Neighbors avoid you on the streets, children throw stones or mimic your grim duties in cruel games. Many executioners lived in designated quarters or houses apart from the town, sometimes even outside city walls. This physical separation reinforced the emotional distance, a boundary between normal folk and those who danced with death daily. Your family life is complicated. Marriage is a challenge. Would any woman truly accept the man whose hands end lives? Some executioners took partners within their own isolated communities, or were resigned to solitude. Yet, rumors whisper of secret love affairs, forbidden romances that defied social taboos. You wonder what life was like for the executioner's children, growing up in the shadow of the gallows. Were they shunned at school, barred from certain trades? Or did they inherit the role, passing down the grim craft like an unwanted family heirloom? Interestingly, some executioners managed to gain grudging respect over time. Their knowledge of anatomy and medicine sometimes made them valuable healers or surgeons in disguise. A few became town advisors on matters of law and order, trusted for their stern impartiality. You recall a peculiar story from Germany, where executioners formed guilds, organizations that protected their members, regulated practices, and even wielded political influence. These guilds created a sense of community and identity, helping to mitigate isolation. However, executioners' lives were often short and harsh. Disease, violence, and suicide were common fates. The psychological toll of the job cannot be overstated. You think about the man who once told you, "To wield death daily is to carry a wound no blade can heal." Some scholars propose that executioners developed unique social coping mechanisms, ritualized humor, communal gatherings, or even secret languages to communicate their shared burden. You might have witnessed moments of kindness from townsfolk, an unspoken nod, a tray of food left at your door, or a brief conversation with someone who saw beyond your reputation. Despite everything, you hold on to small glimmers of hope, that your role, while grim, is a service to order, that justice is served, and that someday the world might be kinder to those who carry its darkest tasks. The life of an executioner is a paradox, at once powerful and powerless, respected and reviled, connected yet isolated. You breathe deeply, the evening air cool against your skin, and remind yourself that even in this shadowed role, you are human. The executioner's life was not just about death. It was also about survival, sometimes on the edge of society's laws and taboos. You often navigate a gray world where your official duties blend into informal roles, like collecting debts, enforcing fines, or even spying for local lords. In some places, executioners doubled as enforcers of local ordinances, the last line of defense against disorder. This extra authority gave you a complicated reputation. Feared enforcer by day, reviled executioner by night. You might have also handled the disposal of unclaimed bodies, cleaning the city's streets, or even assisting in autopsies. Your knowledge of anatomy sometimes made you an unlikely figure in early medical advances, although few welcomed this association openly. Your access to the condemned sometimes meant you heard secrets, confessions, political plots, or whispers of rebellion. Some rulers exploited this, using you as a conduit of intelligence, a position fraught with danger and moral conflict. One quirky historical tidbit involves an executioner in France who supposedly ran a side business selling death charms and protective amulets, mixing fear and commerce in a bizarre hustle. You live amid rumors of curses laid on you by the dying, of ghostly visitations in the dead of night. Some say executioners have a unique connection to the spirit world, a threshold between life and death. These beliefs color how others treat you and how you view your own existence. Historians still argue whether executioners truly believed in these supernatural stories or used them to maintain their authority and mystique. You suspect it's a mix of both, practical folklore and psychological armor. You have seen how the role evolved over time, from brutal spectacle to more civilized executions behind prison walls. Yet the core paradox remains. You hold the power to end lives, yet society keeps you at arm's length, fearing the power you wield. Sometimes you question if the weight of your tools is lighter or heavier than the weight of secrecy you carry. The executioner's life is a constant balancing act between public service and private torment. You imagine how your role might change in future centuries. Would machines replace the axe? Would society ever forgive you? Or, for now, you live with the knowledge that your work is necessary, uncomfortable though it is, part of the dark tapestry of human justice. Your reputation often precedes you, wrapped in whispers and wild stories. In some towns, children are warned to behave or the executioner will come for you. It's a dark bedtime tale, used to keep little ones in line, though few realize how much truth hides behind the myth. You're also the subject of ghost stories. Villagers swear the executioner's spirit haunts the old gallows at midnight, carrying his axe and lamenting lost souls. Some swear these stories are just ways for communities to cope with the fear and guilt of capital punishment. Historians still argue whether these legends stem from genuine hauntings or were fabricated to discourage crime. Among the many odd beliefs, some thought your shadow brought bad luck. Executioners were said to be cursed, unable to marry, or doomed to die violently. These superstitions made your job lonely, even when you were surrounded by crowds. In a peculiar twist, some executioners became figures of dark fascination, even admiration. The French Monsieur de Paris was rumored to be a charismatic man who helped the condemned find peace before their deaths. He had a way with words and a kindness that softened his grim work. Despite everything, you might find small moments of unexpected kindness, like a condemned person who thanked you for your swift mercy, or a crowd member who silently offered a sympathetic glance. You might carry talismans to protect against curses, or even employ a personal priest to bless your tools and rituals. These practices helped shield you from the mental toll of your work, creating a ritualized space where you could feel human. Some scholars suggest that executioners' roles were so stigmatized that their social isolation was partly a mechanism to keep the peace. By setting you apart, society protected itself from the moral weight of your duties. You can't help but reflect on the paradox. You who enact justice become judged yourself, condemned to a life as shadowy as the condemned dot, and so you walk this lonely path, a necessary figure cast in darkness but never quite swallowed by it. Your daily reality is a mix of routine and unpredictability. Some days you simply sharpen your blades, clean your workspace, and practice the motions over and over. The precision of your craft demands it. Other days you are called to act without warning, summoned by a sudden sentence or a political upheaval. One odd part of your job involves managing your tools, not just the axe or sword, but the ropes, hoods, and even the executioner's block itself. You treat them with a kind of reverence, knowing that a dull blade or a frayed rope can mean the difference between a quick death and a prolonged agony. It's the small things that haunt you. You might have developed superstitions about which tools are lucky or cursed, and which days are best for executions. Some executioners believed that wearing certain colors or using specific oils on their blades brought success. In some towns, your tools were displayed as reminders of justice. An executioner's axe hung in the town hall or the prison, a symbol of authority and fear. You felt a strange pride in that, even as it deepened your isolation. You've heard rumors of executioners who wrote memoirs or diaries, hoping to explain their lives and challenge the stigma. Most of these writings were secret, circulated only among trusted circles. Historians still debate how much truth these memoirs contain versus dramatic embellishment. The executioner's daily existence also involved dealing with bureaucratic tasks, recording deaths, notifying officials, and sometimes even collecting fees. This part of your role was less grim but equally essential, adding a layer of paperwork to an otherwise brutal job. There are tales of executioners who, out of compassion or weariness, secretly helped condemned prisoners, slowing the process, offering last comforts, or even helping them escape. Historians debate whether these stories are true acts of kindness or later legends crafted to soften the image of executioners. You think about how you manage your own emotions, the way you compartmentalize the horrors. Perhaps the secret to surviving this role is this quiet internal space, a place where you can momentarily forget the faces and voices. As the sun sets and you prepare for another night, you realize your job is as much about endurance as skill. And even in the darkest moments, you hold on to your humanity, fragile and flickering. As your long career winds down, you begin to reckon with the legacy you'll leave behind. Executioners rarely fade quietly into the night. Their lives and deeds become the stuff of legend, rumor, or outright myth. You wonder how history will remember you, not just as the wielder of the axe, but as a man forced to carry the weight of society's darkest decisions. Some executioners found unexpected ways to reinvent themselves, turning to writing, teaching, or even running inns. Others vanished into obscurity, their names erased or replaced by successors. You contemplate the strange anonymity your work demands, a paradox of power and invisibility. You might reflect on the changes sweeping through your world, how public executions are fading, replaced by quieter, more civilized methods. The axe is slowly being sheathed, though its shadow lingers. Historians still argue about whether this shift truly marks a progress or simply a new form of societal violence, wrapped in sanitized bureaucracy. You think about the personal toll. Decades of witnessing death, carrying out judgment, and living on the margins have left marks not just on your body, but deep in your soul. The loneliness, the whispered curses, the isolation, they are hard to shake. Yet, amid the darkness, you have glimpsed humanity's strange resilience. You've seen moments of grace, dignity, and even forgiveness. Maybe, in your own way, you have served justice, order, and perhaps mercy. You close your eyes and breathe in the quiet night, feeling the cool air wrap around you like a shroud. The executioner's life is a paradox, defined by endings but touched by hope. And as you lay down your tools for the last time, you sense that the story of your role, both feared and misunderstood, is far from over. It will be told, retold, and pondered by those who seek to understand the delicate balance between life, death, and justice. The final shadows lengthen, and you, the reluctant guardian of the gallows, find a moment of peace. Now, the 300-word wind down. The night deepens around you, folding the world into soft silence. You feel the weight of the day's memories ease, each breath slower, gentler. The image of the gallows fades into the quiet hum of distant stars, and the sharp edge of your tools becomes a mere whisper in the dark. There is a strange comfort in this stillness, a promise that tomorrow brings light even after the darkest tasks. The role you've lived, fraught with shadows and burdened with responsibility, becomes part of a larger story, one that stretches beyond pain or fear. As you drift, imagine the world as a tapestry, threads of light and dark woven tightly together. Your thread, though stained and heavy, is necessary, holding the pattern, giving shape to justice and order. Rest now, knowing that even those who carry the heaviest loads are still human, still deserving of peace. The past, with all its challenges, is a distant shore, and you are sailing gently toward it, guided by quiet hope. Goodnight, and may your dreams be gentle. End of script. Sweet dreams.